As COVID-19 and hospitalizations surge across the US, there's still a growing number of people have begun buying into conspiracy theories about the virus. You've probably seen this on social media, on Facebook, people reposting memes that are grossly incorrect about the virus. And that is, of course, part of this effort, concerted effort by conservative media to disseminate false information. So now, according to an Axios Ipsos poll, it's been fairly effective. This poll was released on Tuesday, and it found that a full third of Americans believe that the death toll from the coronavirus has been artificially inflated. As in, they're basically making up the numbers to make the virus appear more deadly than it actually is. Again, that's the conspiracy, right? Now, that number has increased by a lot since early May. It's up from 23%, and whew, that's disastrous. So now you have nearly a full third of the country that thinks that this, oh no, coronavirus, they're just hyping it up. They're making it seem worse than it is. And so it's actually not that bad. So we don't need to wear masks. We don't need to socially, physically distance. We don't need to do any of that. Oh, great. Lovely. Look, in this pandemic, just like any other pandemic, right? We got to have everybody on the same page to beat this thing. And so to have so many people believing that it's not as deadly as it actually is, I mean, that's disastrous. Right now, we actually have about 3 to 4% mortality rate. 3 to 4% of people who contract COVID die. Now, let's put that into perspective, right? Because when you say 3 to 4%, you might think, oh, okay, like that's not a big number. That's actually a lot bigger than the flu, which they love to make a comparison of, right? That's huge. And to put it into perspective of how many people that is, remember, the population of the United States is around 320 million. Let's say 320 million even, right? 3%. If 3% of the population were gone, wiped out today, we would lose 9,600,000 people. 9 million people, almost 10 million people. Now, of course, obviously, not everybody's going to get it, right? Well, I don't know about that. I've seen conservatives arguing that the best thing to do is to make sure that everyone gets it so that we can reopen the economy, right? So if that happens, then roughly about 10 million people would die, but that's okay because at least now you can go to Applebee's without a mask. Awesome. Pro-life party, guys. It's pro-life, right? Okay. So now the infection rate, to go into the math, has been reported around somewhere near 4 million, right? Approaching 4 million people. So you go to 3% of that, and you've got 120,000 deaths. Now, so far in America, it's been reported that we have about 143,000 people that have died from the coronavirus. And so it's a little bit higher than 3%. You could explain that a couple of different ways. For one, maybe we undercounted the deaths, and actually it's a little bit higher than 3%. Or, the testing hasn't caught up to the death rate. So either or, that's still really bad. Those are bad numbers. And so the math is pretty simple. You can see that it adds up, the percentages of how many people have coronavirus and the percentage of people that have died from coronavirus. And so, there it is. The math does not lie. Okay. And yet, according to this poll, a significant number of Americans believe that this death toll has been inflated. And of course, they use anecdotes. I see this a lot. Oh man, a friend of a friend whose uncle's mother works at a hospital and said that they were cooking the numbers in order to get funding from the government. Look, in my line of work, anecdotal evidence, yes, it can be used to make, I think, an effective point, but also it's not real evidence. I mean, I bring up anecdotes every once in a while in order to tell a story, but every time there's the caveat. This is not representative of the majority of cases, right? A friend of a friend's cousin uncle is not a valid source of information. It is hearsay. You know what else is hearsay? Fox News and conservative media. In fact, according to the poll, the number of Americans who believe the death toll is inflated is highest among those who get their news from Fox News. This is no surprise, about 61%, and Republicans 59%. While only 9% of Democrats and 7% of those getting their news from CNN and MSNBC believe the same. I think that is still way too high. Just say. All right. And again, there's a reason that the Republicans, the people who watch Fox News, believe in this. Is because, look, Fox News is the political propaganda arm of the Republican Party. That's exactly what they were set up for. Roger Ailes, back when he was creating Fox News, says, you know what we need? We need a channel. We need a quote-unquote station or news station in order to support the Republican Party and the Republican agenda. So that's it, right? And in this case, we have a Republican president, Donald Trump, and we've got Republicans in Congress, right? And so their first priority is to make sure that we push a narrative that is pro-Trump to protect Donald Trump among the base, and also to protect Republican incumbents. Now, that said, right, they'll lie, they'll distort, they'll report fake news, stuff that's not real, but they'll also criticize Donald Trump or Republicans in office, right? And they'll do that in order to give you the appearance of balance, right? Fox News, we're balanced, right? We're just giving you the facts. And see, sometimes I let Chris Wallace rip Trump a new ass. I mean, and he does. Chris Wallace has been very critical of Donald Trump. But don't forget, this network is all about elevating Republicans. So, and let's also not forget that actual studies have shown that people watching Fox News are actually less informed than people who don't watch news at all. I mean, look, one of the studies I'm going to reference, because I'm citing my sources here, the Farley Dickinson University's Public Mind Survey. So basically what they did is they asked people about current events, right? What's going on in the world? And the whole point of that is to see if they actually know what's going on. They also ask, well, where do you get your news? Where do you consume your news? And they found out that people who consume less news are actually better informed than people who watch Fox News. I mean, that's and really that's evidence of people basically being misinformed, exposed to disinformation from Fox News. It's not making you smarter, it's literally making people dumber. And now more disturbing about that is since then, because that was taken back in 2012, right? Now, in the intervening years, you've had a conservative takeover of your local media stations. Again, we've talked about Sinclair Media on this show before, and what they've been doing to basically buy out local media outlets in order to use them to push propaganda on your local communities. That's it. Part of that propaganda, again, is the idea that the official coronavirus death toll has been inflated in order to hurt Donald Trump politically at the polls, right? And so when you really deconstruct that idea, the fact the idea that the entire world, which has also been dealing with this, and actually has been dealing with this a lot better than we have, because they have used masks and they have done social distancing, and some have locked down their economies, others have not, but have adhered to these standards, and all have, of course, universal health care. They've done a lot better with the virus than we have. I mean, we rank number one, and that's not a good thing. That's very bad, right? And so to think that the entire world, all the doctors, the government, right? The CDC, all these government agencies, the media, the tens of thousands of people who are dead, they have all conspired to make sure that Donald Trump loses in 2020. That is insane. That's what crazy people think. It is deep, deep paranoia. And that, of course, is a trait of people who share conspiracy theories. Another trait is, well, they want to feel special, right? They want to think that they are special. They're only ones privy to this information, and the only people that, thank God, I'm not a sheep, because I think differently than other people, because other people believe in facts and I don't. Not only that, but right, a lot of this is by design. Okay. Decades ago, conservatives wanted to undermine public trust in government and media and institutions and academia. And of course, it's to weaken them so that they can better sell off the government to private industries, privatize public works, and basically lie to people and make it easier for them to basically rob us. I mean, look, all you got to do is follow the money, right? And they want to take all that money and funnel it to themselves, put it in their own pocket, and to their donors, and that's how they continue to have a hold on power. And then it helps them to, of course, being able to mislead people when people aren't educated enough to be able to do critical thinking, and not able to look up facts. Anti-intellectualism, by the way, is a staple of American conservatism. And by the way, I think it's a staple of conservatism basically everywhere. Because everywhere, intellectuals continue to prove that conservative policies don't really work and often only lead to a concentration of wealth and power towards a small group of people. So I guess you could say they actually do work, because that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point of conservative policies, is to get wealth and power towards a small group of people. So, and that's what we see today, by the way. I mean, America has the highest amount of income inequality among the G7 nations. And this is according to the Gini coefficient, which tracks inequality. We have been steadily rising, and now we are the top country within 7 industrial modernized countries with, powerful modern economies. We're the most unequal. And all these institutions, academia, media, for the most part, all they're doing is really reporting factual information. Conservatives tend to find that information very inconvenient, and that's why Republican administrations always try to shut them down. Or, in the case of government agencies, defund them to the point of near uselessness. So then they can break it apart, privatize it, and give it to a corporation, or just shut it down completely, so they can do political correctness. And that's what you see a whole time, during this entire this pandemic, is conservatives doing political correctness. Now, look, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody that there's a lot of distrust in institutions in the public, a lot of distrust in institutions on the left as well as the right. Okay. And some of it is definitely understandable, but understand where that leads to. Politicians will defund it. Again, we're talking about the right wing here. Conservatives will defund it. That ends up leading to those systems not working, right? Which leads to more distrust in the systems, which leads to more defunding, which is a pretty vicious cycle. Okay. And so that's a problem. Now, interestingly enough, I mentioned all this distrust in institutions, right? Well, this poll also reflects a loss of faith in the government as a result of COVID-19. And that, of course, is understandable. Trust in the CDC, for example, both dropped by 15%, as well as state governments by 50% from April to 70 to 57%, respectively. Now, a lot of states, of course, have reopened too early. And so that has led to a lot of distrust. As far as in the CDC, for example, I think that has to go with some conflicting information coming out about the virus. Now, the thing about that is, well, there's a lot that we don't know about the virus. It's a new virus. It's a new strain of was it CoV-2 or CoV-SARS-2? Can't remember quite what the designation is other than, SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. And so there's a lot that we don't know. And when science plays out, because it is a process, sometimes there's conflicting information, not only about what it does, but also how to effectively combat it. Okay. So there's that. I'll get to that point a little bit later in this segment. But first, only 35% of Americans trust the federal government when it comes to COVID-19, and about 31% trust the White House. Notice how the same amount of people who, by the way, who believe that the death counts are inflated are the ones that trust the White House. It's the same percentage, 31%. But for everyone else, did you know that a similarly large number of people also believe the death tolls have been undercounted? That's about 34% of Americans. Unlike the overinflated conspiracy theory pushed by conservative media, is actually backed up by studies. For example, there's a study published July 1st by Virginia Commonwealth University and Yale University researchers in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And the reason for that, of course, is because in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what was killing people. I mean, later on, as we began to learn more about the virus, people went back and, people that have died from what we now know as COVID symptoms, right? Or complications, resulting from contracting COVID-19, those deaths were reclassified, which leads to, of course, to conspiracy theories. The right wing jumps on that and says, see, they're going back and they're changing things. They're fudging the numbers. But no, that's how science works, right? And understand that science is a messy process. And to see it unfold in real time, I can understand why some people would lose their faith and cast out. But again, they don't understand that science is this process where there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of data. Sometimes that data conflicts, and it has to be tested, measured, retested, observed through a significant period of time. And so far, we have not had this virus for a significant period of time. And by the way, theories that were valid or seemed valid end up getting disproven all the time. And that's why you have changes of misinformation. It is all part of the process. And that's why we've had a lot of confusion early on about wearing masks, for example. We didn't have as much information on the efficacy of using masks. And the federal government, of course, had botched their response. They did not manufacture more masks. The masks in the strategic stockpile were, in a lot of cases, moldy, unusable. And so the federal government, now presented with this respiratory virus, we're very worried about medical professionals running out of PPE just in case the hospitals get overloaded, because they got to plan for the worst case emergency, right? And so downplaying the threat and then telling people, no, you don't need to wear masks. Well, that worked against them. I understand what they were trying to do, but again, that's part of the problem. They were not prepared for this when the Obama administration had left them notes saying, be prepared for some sort of respiratory virus. So make sure you update your stockpiles and all that stuff and do some preparation. The Trump administration didn't do that. The Trump administration fired a lot of the team working on pandemic response. And so that's part of why we were unprepared. And yes, part of why we were told, don't wear masks in the beginning. The other part, of course, is that we didn't really know how effective masks were. Once you had studies out there that showed how effective they were at slowing the transmission of the virus, as well as how easy it was to spread, and how social distancing, as well as wearing the masks, were the best way to take personal responsibility, well, that's when the message changed. And so understand, though, that does create some uncertainty, conflicting messages. People hear it at different times. It gets reported in different ways. And that, of course, creates distrust in our, in the government, as well as the CDC and the message from the media. And so I get that. And again, science, that's how it works. Conclusions changed based on new information. It's an imperfect process, but rarely do its conclusions get proven wrong. And when they do, that's actually great. That means we learned something new, something was unexpected. We've actually deepened perhaps our understanding about certain subjects. And guess what? It creates more questions. And when you have more questions, you're able to do more studies, more experiments, and deepen your understanding. So the last thing I want to touch on is this, right? According to the poll, the majority of respondents are casting blame on their fellow Americans for worsening the pandemic. 74% of Americans believe their fellow citizens are behaving in ways that are making the country's recovery from the pandemic somewhat or much worse. And in this case, 100%, 100% correct. If you're not wearing a mask in public, you are making it worse. It's as simple as that. If you're going to COVID parties to purposely infect yourself or other people, then you're making it much, much worse. So understand, right? Again, there are differing levels, obviously, of making it worse. But either way, if you're not, social distancing and wearing a mask, you're generally not doing the right thing, especially if you want to reopen the economy, as all of us do. Nobody wants to be locked down. I don't want to be locked down. I don't want the economy to go to crap. I don't really care. I want a good economy, even if it's under Donald Trump. Great. Except that we haven't had a good economy under Donald Trump, although at least you could say it was better pre-COVID. That said, right, I don't feel good about this poll. I don't. There are good data points in it, sure, but the number of people buying into ridiculous conspiracies is just too high. And it really makes me concerned about this country, because we're not going to be able to contain this if we don't all take the necessary actions to do so. 30% of the country thinks it's a hoax. I mean, this is terrible. That's going to mean more deaths, longer lockdowns, and even more economic pain. If you care about any of those things, which you should care about all of them, then you should do the right thing and actually be a good member of your community and just wear a mask, do your social distancing, and don't go out unless you have to, until the rates of this virus start to become more manageable. Then we can start to go back out and hopefully eventually be able to beat this thing and not have to wear masks anymore. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.